I'm Adrian Miller, the soul food scholar, dropping knowledge like hot biscuits. My day job is I'm the executive director of the Colorado Council of Churches. But my side hustle, and actually my passion, is I write books on food history. So the first book I wrote was on the history of soul food. It's called Soul Food, The Surprising Story of American Cuisine. My second book is on the history of African American presidential chefs, and it's called The President's Kitchen Cabinet, the story of the African Americans who have fed our first families from the Washingtons to the Obamas. And I am currently at work on my third book, which is going to be on the history of African American barbecue culture. The tentative title is Black Smoke, which is pretty tight. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. Then I went to Stanford University for undergrad, and then I went to Georgetown Law School. After I practiced law for about 4 years, I just hated it. It got to the point where I was singing spirituals in my office. So I realized that I needed to do something else. So I actually was going to open up a soul food restaurant in Denver. And then a classmate of mine from Georgetown Law School called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, Adrian, I'm working in the Clinton White House. There's an opening for this thing called the Initiative for One America. Do you have friends back in DC who might be interested in that position?" I did the same thing that Dick Cheney did when George W. Bush asked him to find a vice president. I was the head of the search committee, only my name went on the list. So I ended up working for President Clinton on the Initiative for One America. Things kind of changed after my stint in the Clinton White House. So I was unemployed, watching a lot of daytime television, feeling really bad. And I just said, I should probably read something. So I went to the local bookstore, I'm browsing, and I see this book on the shelf about a history of Southern food, and written by a guy named John Edgerton. I get home, and I'm reading the book, and early in the book, Edgerton wrote that the tribute to African American achievement in cookery has yet to be written. That fascinated me. So with no qualifications at all, except for eating a lot of soul food and cooking some, I embarked on that journey. I was essentially like a grad student. On the weekends, after I got home from church, early in the morning, I just started writing. I think food tells the story of a people. And so I thought by learning about the food of my ancestors and trying to trace roots back to regions in West Africa, it was a process of self-discovery. I could learn more about myself. And to me, that was just a fascinating story to see the movement of people, how they got to a new place, tried to recreate home, often through food, and how they adapted to their new surroundings, getting new ingredients, learning new things from their neighbors, but also this connection to a place that was familiar and trying to bring that to the new place and try to ground themselves and root themselves. And to me, that's just a fascinating process. Having done the research and the writing and really delving into the backstory of this food, when I see a plate of soul food now, I'm seeing the intermixing of cultures and people all together, not just the food. I'm not looking at the food as just fuel. I'm actually looking at the ingredients, and the research and the writing has given it more texture. I know the backstory of these ingredients. I know how they play out in different cultures over different periods of time. And so it's interesting to me to see how is this being presented now? What does it mean now in today's culture? And then have that backstory of how it may have played out 100 years ago. I am trying to celebrate things that have not been celebrated in the past, I don't think adequately. I'm also trying to bring people from the margins into the mainstream stories of how food plays out in our country. I think in a lot of the historical accounts of our country, especially through food, African Americans have been left out of the story. My current project is a history of African American barbecue culture. And the reason I'm writing this book is because recent media about barbecue, it really ignores African Americans, which I think is whack, because African Americans are central to the barbecue story. It's going to be a thump on the head to say, look, you can't tell the American barbecue story without including African Americans. And so I'm going to talk about the history of barbecue, how African Americans get associated with barbecue very strongly by the mid-1800s. And then I'm going to show how barbecue plays out in different aspects in African American culture. The reason I write is because so much of my history, especially in West Africa, was oral traditions. And some of these things get passed on, some things don't. I wanted to capture those stories. I wanted to show that legacy, to document it, so that hundreds of years from now, somebody can pick that book up and know those stories. And I think that will help the legacy of this cuisine live on. To me, writing a book about food is a lot like cooking. Both of them are an act of love. When somebody cooks for you, they're saying that they care about you, they care about your survival. They're saying, I love you. And my writing is the same thing. I'm taking the time to figure out the story. I want to recognize people who haven't been recognized, people who've been on the margins. I want to celebrate things that haven't been celebrated before. And at some point, I create this product to share with others. You know, in a lot of ways, a book is like a table of ideas. You have people coming together, they're connecting with something that may be familiar, they may be curious about something they don't know, but there's this idea that, hey, we're coming together to explore this thing. And that's why I write about food. I want people to explore these cuisines that they may not be familiar with, or they may not know a lot about the backstory. I want them to get to know people that they probably have never heard of, to hear their struggles, their triumphs, how they have been a part of the American food story. And so, to me, food is a connector, and I think a book is a way to deepen those connections, because it's not always just about the food, it's about the people, it's about the context, it's about all of these things coming together. And it brings a lot of joy to see people connecting through my books, through my writing, and exploring the common humanity that we all have.